The thunder of hooves echoed through Bitter Canyon as Zara Gardner pressed her back against the rust-colored cliff wall, the cold metal of a revolver clutched in her trembling hand. The year was 1876, and she was miles from the nearest town of Promise Creek, Arizona Territory, with no help in sight and 5 outlaws advancing toward her with predatory grins. "Nowhere to run now, pretty lady," called the largest of the men, a brute with a scar running from his eye to his chin. "Might as well hand over that satchel and anything else you're carrying." Zara's chest heaved with ragged breaths. The satchel containing her father's life savings and the deed to their ranch was clutched against her side. Her father hadn't lived to see his dream fulfilled, dying 3 days prior from a bullet meant for the town marshal, but she'd be damned if she'd let his legacy die with him. "I'd rather die than give you anything," she spat, raising her revolver despite knowing she had only 2 bullets left. After the ambush half a mile back, she'd managed to escape on foot, but not before emptying most of her father's gun into one of their companions. The leader laughed, a cruel sound that bounced off the canyon walls. "That can be arranged, Miss Gardner, but not before we have some fun." The outlaws fanned out, 5 men against 1 woman, backed into a dead-end slot canyon with walls too steep to climb. Zara steadied her aim, her finger tightening on the trigger. She'd take at least 2 with her. Then came a sound like distant thunder. A plume of dust rose beyond the outlaws, drawing their attention. The thunder grew louder, resolving into the pounding of hooves against hard-packed earth. "What the?" The leader turned, his hand dropping to his holster. A horse and rider appeared at the mouth of the canyon, silhouetted against the setting sun. The horse, a magnificent black stallion, reared up as the rider pulled sharply on the reins. Without hesitation, the stranger drew his revolver and fired in one fluid motion. One of the outlaws dropped immediately, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, diving for cover behind boulders as they returned fire. The mysterious rider spurred his horse forward, charging directly into the line of fire, weaving between bullets as if he could predict their paths. "Get down!" he shouted to Zara as he rode toward her, his voice deep and commanding. Zara dropped to a crouch as bullets whizzed overhead. The stranger leaped from his horse while it was still moving, rolling behind the same outcropping of rock that sheltered her. "Xavier Zachary," he said, tipping his hat as casually as if they'd met at a town social. His eyes, a striking blue against his sun-bronzed skin, assessed her quickly. "You hurt, just my pride," Zara replied, her voice steadier than she felt, "and maybe my prospects for a long life." Xavier gave her a quick grin that transformed his rugged face. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He peered around the rock, ducked back as a bullet chipped stone inches from his head. 5 against 2, I've faced worse odds." 6, Zara corrected. "I shot one earlier." Xavier's eyebrows rose. "Impressive. You got any bullets left in that gun, Miss Gardner?" "Zara Gardner, and I have exactly 2. "Make 'em count," he said, then whistled sharply. His horse, remarkably, had not fled but stood at the edge of the fighting, stomping nervously. At Xavier's signal, it trotted closer. "Cover me," he said, and before Zara could respond, he dashed to his horse, bullets kicking up dust at his heels. He reached into his saddlebag, retrieved something, and dove back behind their cover. "Dynamite," he explained, showing her the sticks bound together with twine. "Sometimes negotiations require emphasis." "You're crazy," Zara breathed. "Been called worse." He struck a match against his boot. "When I throw this, we run for my horse. You get on first." "But no time for arguments, Miss Gardner." Xavier lit the fuse, counted to 3, then hurled the bundle over the boulder toward the center of the canyon. The outlaws shouted in alarm. Xavier grabbed Zara's hand, and they sprinted toward his waiting horse as bullets continued to fly around them. He practically threw her onto the saddle, then vaulted up behind her just as the dynamite exploded. The blast shook the canyon, sending rocks and debris raining down. The horse bolted forward with both riders, galloping past the disoriented outlaws and out of the canyon. They rode hard for nearly an hour, putting distance between themselves and the outlaws. Finally, Xavier guided his horse into a small grove of cottonwoods beside a creek, where they dismounted. "We should be safe here for the night," he said, loosening his horse's saddle straps. "They won't be following us in the dark, especially not after that welcome we gave them." Zara sank to the ground, the adrenaline draining from her body, leaving her trembling. "Thank you," she said simply. "You saved my life." Xavier shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Zara shook her head firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most men would have ridden the other direction at the first sound of gunfire." She studied him openly now. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that spoke of hardship and resilience. Not conventionally handsome, perhaps, but striking with that strong jaw, those alert eyes, and the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "What were you doing in Bitter Canyon anyway?" he asked, gathering wood for a small fire. Zara touched the satchel still secured to her side. "Heading back from Promise Creek, I had business at the land office." Xavier's hands stilled. "You're traveling alone. My father was supposed to be with me." Her voice caught. "He was killed 3 days ago." Xavier's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Gardner. Please call me Zara." She watched him build the fire with practiced efficiency. "How did you happen to be in the canyon at exactly the right moment, Mr. Zachary?" "Xavier," he corrected. "And I was tracking those men. They're part of the Rattlesnake Gang. They've been terrorizing ranchers and stage coaches from here to Santa Fe." "You're a lawman?" Zara asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Used to be. Now I'm just a man with a purpose." As the fire crackled to life, Xavier retrieved a coffee pot and 2 tin cups from his saddlebags, along with jerky and hardtack. He moved with the economy of someone accustomed to life on the trail. "It's not much," he apologized, handing her a portion. "It's more than I expected to have tonight," Zara replied. "I thought I'd be dead by now." They ate in companionable silence as darkness settled around them. Zara found herself studying Xavier when he wasn't looking the way the firelight played across his features, the careful way he tended his horse, the watchful alertness that never seemed to leave him even when he appeared relaxed. "Why were they after you?" Xavier finally asked. "Those men don't usually bother with lone travelers unless they're carrying something valuable." Zara hesitated, then decided that the man who had risked his life for her deserved the truth. She opened the satchel and showed him the deed and the leather pouch of coins and greenbacks. "My father's life savings, $5,000. He spent 20 years saving for his dream, a cattle ranch in the high country north of here. The land was finally available and we were going to start a new life." She swallowed hard. "Now it's just me." Xavier frowned. "How did they know you were carrying that kind of money?" "Someone must have talked at the land office. The clerk wasn't exactly discreet when he counted out the bills my father gave him as a down payment." "And you still plan to start this ranch, alone?" There was no judgment in his voice, only genuine curiosity. "I don't know what else to do," Zara admitted. "It was his dream, but it became mine too. I've been working cattle since I could walk. I know ranching." She lifted her chin. "And I've got enough saved to hire a couple of hands once I get the place started." Xavier nodded slowly, respect evident in his expression. "I've known men who'd back down from less of a challenge." "I'm not a man," Zara said with a small smile. "Maybe that's my advantage." Xavier chuckled, a warm sound that made something flutter in Zara's chest. "Maybe it is at that, Zara Gardner." They talked long into the night, Xavier explaining that he'd been a deputy marshal in the New Mexico territory until the Rattlesnake Gang had raided his town 2 years earlier. They'd killed the marshal, his mentor and friend, and several townsfolk. Xavier had been away, escorting a prisoner to Santa Fe. When he returned to find the devastation, he'd turned in his badge and dedicated himself to tracking down every last member of the gang. 3 more left now," he said, staring into the flames, "including Jasper Reeves, their leader. The man with the scar, Zara asked. Xavier nodded. That's him. He's wanted in 4 territories. There's $1,000 bounty on him. Is that what you're after, the bounty? Justice, Xavier corrected. The money's just a bonus. As they prepared to sleep, Xavier insisted Zara take his bedroll while he kept watch. Too exhausted to argue, she accepted gratefully, but sleep proved elusive despite her fatigue. Xavier, she said softly, why did you really charge into that canyon today? You could have picked them off from a distance. You didn't have to risk yourself like that. There was a long silence, and Zara thought perhaps he wouldn't answer. I saw you, he finally said. Standing there against that wall, outnumbered but not backing down, something about that. He cleared his throat. I couldn't stand by and watch what would have happened next. The simple honesty in his voice touched something deep within her. Well, I'm glad you didn't. Get some sleep, Zara. Tomorrow will be a long day. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. They broke camp quickly, Xavier constantly scanning the horizon for signs of pursuit. We need to get you somewhere safe, he said as they mounted his horse. Where were you headed before the ambush, Northridge? It's a small settlement about 30 miles northeast of here. The ranch land is another 10 miles beyond that. Xavier nodded. I know it. We can be there by nightfall if we push hard. They rode double, Zara seated behind Xavier with her arms around his waist. The closeness was both unsettling and comforting. She could feel the solid strength of him, smell the leather and pine scent of his clothing, and despite the circumstances, she found herself increasingly aware of him as a man rather than just her rescuer. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horse beside a small spring. While Xavier filled their canteens, Zara scanned the surrounding landscape with a practiced eye. This is good grazing land, she observed, not as rich as what my father picked out, but decent. You really do know ranching, Xavier remarked, impressed. My father raised me to be self-sufficient after my mother died, said a woman needs to stand on her own 2 feet in this world. She smiled wryly. Though he probably didn't envision me facing down outlaws. He'd be proud of how you handled yourself. Before they could mount up again, Xavier suddenly tensed, his hand going to his revolver. Get down, he whispered urgently. They crouched behind a stand of scrub juniper as 3 riders appeared on a ridge about a 1/4 mile away. Rattlesnakes. Zara breathed. Xavier nodded grimly. They're persistent, I'll give them that. There between us and Northridge, Zara noted. We'll have to circle wide. There's another pass about 5 miles west. It'll add hours to our journey. We don't have a choice. They mounted quietly and rode away from the spring, keeping to low ground and out of sight. The detour took them through rougher country, a labyrinth of arroyos and mesas that would be easy to get lost in without Xavier's unerring sense of direction. As they rode, Zara found herself telling Xavier more about her life, how her mother had died of fever when she was 12, how she and her father had moved from place to place, working other people's ranches while saving for their own. Xavier, in turn, shared stories of his childhood in Texas, his years as a lawman, and the people he'd met along the way. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising a storm. The temperature dropped and a chill wind picked up. We need shelter, Xavier said, eyeing the sky. There's no way we'll make Northridge tonight, not with this weather coming in. What about there? Zara pointed to a rocky outcropping in the distance. Xavier nodded. Good eye, might be a cave or at least an overhang we can use. They reached the formation just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Luck was with them, a shallow cave cut into the base of the cliff, large enough for them and the horse. They settled in as the storm unleashed its fury outside. Xavier built another small fire near the mouth of the cave, where the smoke could escape without suffocating them. The close quarters meant they sat shoulder to shoulder, their backs against the cave wall. Some adventure you're having, Xavier remarked as lightning illuminated the landscape outside. Not exactly what I had in mind when I set out from Promise Creek, Zara agreed. She glanced at him. What will you do, after you find the rest of the rattlesnake gang, I mean? Xavier was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might not answer. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I've been chasing them for so long, I haven't thought much beyond that. You could go back to being a lawman," she suggested. He shook his head. "That life's behind me. I've seen too much, done too much." "Then what? Maybe find a quiet place, somewhere I could put down roots." He looked at her then, something unreadable in his eyes. "What about you? After you get your ranch started," Zara hugged her knees to her chest, "build a herd, make it successful. Prove my father right about the land." Alone, the question hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. "For now," she answered softly. Thunder crashed outside, making them both jump, then laugh at their nervousness. When their laughter faded, a different kind of tension filled the small space between them. Xavier's eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. Zara felt her breath catch. She'd been kissed before clumsy attempts by cowboys at barn dances or socials, but the look in Xavier's eyes promised something entirely different. Another crack of lightning illuminated the cave, casting stark shadows across his face. Impulsively, Zara reached out and traced the scar through his eyebrow. "How did you get this?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Bar fight in Tucson," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Man accused me of cheating at cards, I wasn't. And this one." Her finger moved to a thin line along his jaw. "Knife fight, Santa Fe, 3 years ago." Her hand lingered on his face. "You've lived a dangerous life, Xavier Zachary." "No more dangerous than riding alone through Bitter Canyon with $5,000, he countered, his hand coming up to capture hers. The touch of his calloused fingers against her skin sent warmth spreading through her. They stayed like that, suspended in the moment, until Xavier gently released her hand. "We should get some rest," he said, though his eyes told a different story. Zara nodded, understanding his restraint. They were still strangers, thrown together by circumstance. Yet she couldn't deny the connection forming between them, a recognition of something kindred in each other's spirits. They slept on opposite sides of the fire that night, but Zara dreamed of blue eyes and gentle hands. Morning brought clear skies and the discovery that the storm had washed away their tracks. They set out early, making good time across the open country. By mid-afternoon, they crested a rise and saw Northridge in the distance, a small collection of buildings nestled in a valley. "We'll be there within the hour," Xavier said, relief evident in his voice. "You'll be safe there." Zara felt a surprising pang of disappointment at the thought of their journey ending. "And you'll be moving on, I suppose, to find the rest of the gang." Xavier's expression was unreadable. "That's the plan." They rode in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the outskirts of town, however, Xavier suddenly reined in his horse. "Something's not right," he said, scanning the apparently peaceful town. "What do you mean? It's too quiet." No movement on the streets. Now that he mentioned it, Zara noticed it too. For mid-afternoon in a ranching community, the main street was eerily deserted. "Maybe there's a funeral or a town meeting," she suggested. Xavier shook his head. "Maybe." But his hand moved to his revolver, and he guided his horse off the main trail, approaching the town from a less obvious direction. They tied the horse behind the livery stable and proceeded on foot, moving cautiously from building to building. When they reached the alley beside the general store, Xavier held up his hand, halting Zara. Voices drifted from the street men's voices, harsh and commanding. "Everybody stay inside. Mayor, you've got 5 minutes to open that safe or we start burning buildings." Xavier's jaw tightened. "Rattlesnakes," he whispered. "They must have ridden straight here, figuring we'd head for the nearest town." "What do we do?" Zara whispered back. Xavier peered around the corner, then ducked back. "There's 4 of them. Must have picked up another member somewhere. They've got the townspeople trapped in the buildings while they rob the place." "Is Reeves with them?" Xavier nodded grimly. "Front and center giving orders." Zara's mind raced. "We need to help these people." "We will." Xavier checked his revolver, then pulled a second gun from his boot. "I count 26 bullets between us. Should be enough." Just the two of us against 4 experienced killers. Unless you've got a better idea, he gave her a sideways look. You could stay here, no one would blame you. Zara squared her shoulders. Not a chance. Those people are in danger because of me. Pride flickered in Xavier's eyes. I was hoping you'd say that. He handed her his second gun. You're a good shot. Good enough. Xavier quickly outlined a plan. He would create a distraction at one end of the street, while Zara positioned herself on the roof of the general store with a clear view of the outlaws. When the shooting started, the townspeople would likely take cover, giving them a cleaner field of fire. Just don't hit any of the locals, Xavier cautioned. And if things go bad, you run, get out of town and head for the ranch. Understand, Zara wanted to argue but knew he was right. One of them needed to survive to warn others. She nodded reluctantly. Getting onto the store roof was easier than expected. A ladder led up from the back alley to a small hatch, likely used for maintenance. Zara positioned herself behind the false front of the building, peering through a gap at the scene below. The 4 outlaws had gathered in front of the bank. Jasper Reeves was pacing impatiently while another man trained a shotgun on the bank's front door. The other 2 kept watch on the street, guns drawn. Zara checked both revolvers, took a deep breath, and waited for Xavier's signal. It came in the form of a whistle, a perfect imitation of a mourning dove, followed by the crash of breaking glass, as Xavier threw something through the window of an empty building at the far end of the street. The outlaws whirled toward the sound, guns raised. That was when Xavier stepped into the street, revolvers already drawn. Reeves, he called. Remember me. The scarred leader's face contorted with recognition and fury. Zachary, boys, kill him. Gunfire erupted instantly. Xavier dove behind a water trough as bullets splintered wood around him. From her perch, Zara had a perfect view of 2 of the outlaws who had taken cover behind a wagon. She steadied her aim and fired. Her first shot missed, but her second caught one man in the shoulder, spinning him around. He dropped his gun, clutching at the wound. The other man looked up, trying to locate the second shooter, and Xavier used the distraction to pick him off with a clean shot to the chest. Reeves and his remaining man had taken cover behind the bank's stone steps. They were pinned down but still dangerous. Give it up, Reeves, Xavier shouted. You're not walking away this time. Neither are you, Zachary, Reeves called back, then whispered something to his companion. The outlaw suddenly broke cover, running toward the general store toward Zara's position. She realized with horror that they must have spotted her. She fired twice, missing both times as the man zigzagged. He disappeared beneath her, entering the store. Zara heard pounding footsteps on the stairs inside. She scrambled away from the edge, pointing both guns at the roof hatch just as it flew open. The outlaw's head appeared, and Zara didn't hesitate. She fired, and the man collapsed half in and half out of the opening. Below, the gunfight continued. Xavier had managed to work his way closer to Reeves's position, moving from cover to cover. Reeves, realizing he was alone, made a desperate break for his horse tied outside the saloon. Xavier stood in the middle of the street, took careful aim, and fired. Reeves staggered but kept running. Xavier fired again, and this time Reeves went down, clutching his leg. By now, townspeople had begun to emerge cautiously from buildings. The sheriff, who had apparently been locked in his own jail during the raid, took charge, securing Reeves with handcuffs while others checked on the fallen outlaws. Zara made her way down from the roof, her hands shaking with the aftermath of the violence. She stepped onto the street just as Xavier turned toward the general store, concern etched on his face. Their eyes met across the dusty street, and for a moment, everything else faded away. Then Xavier was striding toward her, and without caring who was watching, Zara ran to meet him. They collided in the middle of the street, arms wrapping around each other. Xavier lifted her off her feet in an embrace that spoke volumes about his fear for her safety. "You're all right," he murmured into her hair. "When I heard that shot on the roof." "I'm fine," she assured him, pulling back just enough to look into his face. "We did it." The sound of slow clapping interrupted their moment. They turned to see the sheriff approaching, a bemused expression on his weathered face. "Don't know who you folks are," he said, "but Northridge owes you a debt of gratitude. Those men rode in this morning, locked me up, and were planning to clean out the whole town." Xavier introduced himself and Zara, explaining briefly about their encounter with the Rattlesnake Gang in Bitter Canyon. "Zachary," the sheriff's eyebrows rose. "The deputy marshal who's been hunting the rattlesnakes heard stories about you, didn't think they were true." "Most probably aren't," Xavier said modestly. "Well, there's reward money for these men. Reeves alone is worth 1,000. Split it with the town," Xavier said without hesitation. "For damages." The sheriff looked surprised but nodded. "Mighty generous. Now, you two look like you could use a hot meal and a real bed. The hotel's offering rooms on the house for our saviors." After the excitement died down and Reeves and his surviving companion were secured in the jail, Xavier and Zara found themselves in the hotel dining room, sharing the first proper meal they'd had in days. "What happens now?" Zara asked, the question that had been hovering between them finally spoken. Xavier set down his fork. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether a certain determined ranch woman might want a partner." Zara's heart skipped a beat. "A business partner," a slow smile spread across Xavier's face. "That too, eventually, but I was thinking of something more permanent." "We barely know each other," Zara pointed out, though her voice lacked conviction. "I know you're brave, resourceful, and stubborn as they come. I know you can shoot straight under pressure and that you don't abandon people who need help." His eyes softened. "I know that in 2 days you've made me think about a future I never thought I'd have. And what future is that? One with roots, a home, someone to build something with." He reached across the table, his fingers lightly touching hers. "I'm not proposing marriage, Zara, not yet, but I am proposing we see where this leads." Zara turned her hand over, her fingers intertwining with his. "My father always said when you find good grazing land, stake your claim before someone else does." Xavier laughed, the sound warming her from the inside out. "Is that a yes?" "It's a I'd like to see that ranch land too, Mr. Zachary." 2 weeks later, they crested a hill and looked down at a valley nestled between pine-covered mountains. A clear stream wound through meadows that stretched for acres, the grass lush and green after the recent rains. "It's perfect," Xavier breathed, taking in the view. Beside him, Zara nodded, emotion making speech difficult. Just like he described it. They'd spent those 2 weeks getting to know each other, talking long into the night, sharing their histories, their dreams, their fears. The attraction between them had deepened into something more profound, a connection that neither had expected but both now cherished. Xavier dismounted, then helped Zara down from her newly purchased horse. They stood together on the hilltop, surveying what would become their home. "Your father chose well," Xavier said softly, his arm around her waist. "So did I," Zara replied, looking up at him. Their lips met in a kiss that held promise, passion, and the certainty that what had begun in danger in Bitter Canyon would continue here in this peaceful valley, a love forged in gunfire but built to last through all the seasons to come. The Gardner Zachary Ranch became known throughout the territory for its fine cattle, its fairness to workers, and the strength of the partnership at its heart. And on summer evenings, visitors might hear Zara tell wide-eyed children the story of how she was cornered by outlaws in a canyon, until a cowboy rode through Gunfire to claim her safety and ultimately, her heart.